Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're doing a deep dive into a really fascinating political playbook surrounding the Save America Act. We're basing this breakdown on an analysis recently laid out by YouTube commentator Matt Moore's TV. Now look, no matter where you sit on the political spectrum, we are just looking strictly at the mechanics here. We're going to see exactly how politicians maneuver behind the scenes to completely bypass traditional legislative roadblocks. It's honestly incredibly insightful to pull back the curtain on this kind of thing. So, here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the Save America Act itself, then look at the reconciliation strategy, how they're tying elections to the budget, the actual Senate math, and finally, the political pressure and ultimatums involved. All right, Section 1, the Save America Act. Let's look at the legislative objective. Our source material focuses entirely on a massive, coordinated push to get this piece of legislation across the finish line. According to the commentator, passing the Save America Act is the primary focus for Republican leadership right now, and it's being heavily championed by key figures like House Speaker Mike Johnson and former President Donald Trump. So what's actually in it? Well, according to the host, this legislation zeroes in on three very specific election requirements. It aims to mandate voter ID nationwide, require strict proof of citizenship to even register to vote, and this is a big one, severely limit the use of mail-in ballots. They'd only leave exemptions for very specific things like severe illness, military deployment, or necessary travel. The source basically frames this as the ultimate election security package. Now, you have to hear these polling numbers the source presents because they are striking. The argument here is that this bill has massive bipartisan public support. We're talking claims of 85% of all Americans wanting these measures. That breaks down to 99% of Republicans and a pretty staggering 77% of Democrats. The strategy here is pretty clear, right? You frame the legislation not as some partisan wish list, but as a universally demanded reform. By highlighting these numbers, the architects of this playbook can argue that any politician voting against it is literally defying the clear will of the people. Moving on to Section 2, the reconciliation strategy. This is where we see how they plan to use a procedural loophole. Historically, the path to passing something like this seemed completely closed. Just consider this recent quote from Senate leadership. In an appropriations hearing a few weeks ago, Senator Mitch McConnell stated definitively that there would not be another reconciliation bill this year, and Senator Susan Collins openly agreed with that assessment. That effectively sent a huge signal to the House saying, hey, don't bother trying to use budget loopholes for the rest of the term. But here's the twist. Speaker Johnson intends to completely bypass that resistance. How? By stapling the Save America Act to a brand new, highly appealing reconciliation bill. The source highlights that Johnson is essentially just ignoring the Senate leadership's timeline altogether. Instead, his plan is to construct this massive America First budgetary bill from scratch, attach the Save America Act right onto it, and ship the whole shebang over to the Senate. The goal? Make the entire package so fundamentally appealing to conservative priorities that literally no Republican could safely vote against it without facing massive political backlash. And this right here perfectly illustrates why this procedural move is such an absolute game changer for their strategy. It drastically lowers the threshold for victory. See, under normal circumstances, a controversial bill like this would face a Senate filibuster, meaning you'd need 60 votes to advance it. And in a deeply divided Senate, finding 60 votes is practically impossible. But a budget reconciliation bill is a special parliamentary tool that completely bypasses the filibuster. You only need a simple majority, just 50 votes, plus the vice president to break a tie. It completely rewrites the mathematical reality of the Senate. Which brings us to Section 3, tying elections to the budget. How do you make voting a budgetary issue? The Senate parliamentarian is very strict about what can actually go into a reconciliation bill. It has to directly impact federal spending or revenues. So, the original commentator outlines the playbook's counter-argument, and it follows this exact logical progression. Step 1, illegal immigrants vote. Step 2, this leads to a massive waste of taxpayer dollars. Step 3, therefore, by implementing strict voter ID and citizenship checks, the government actually saves taxpayer money. To the strategist, this simple three-step logical bridge perfectly justifies slapping the budgetary label on election security. All right, Section 4, the Senate math. Let's actually count the votes. So can they actually pull this off? The commentator points out that a recent Senate vote proved they technically do have the 50 necessary votes on record. They point to a vote back on June 19th, led by Senator Mike Lee. This was basically a test run on the core fundamentals of the Save America Act, and critically, it successfully secured 50 Republican votes, even getting late support from moderate Senator Susan Collins. For the strategists pushing this playbook, this was the green light. It proved the math was actually physically possible. But, securing the votes on a test measure is one thing. Actually holding those 50 votes together under a blinding spotlight to push a highly contested bill through a controversial loophole, that is a whole different ballgame. To make sure nobody backs down when the pressure mounts, the architects of this playbook need a serious enforcement mechanism. And that leads us to our final part, Section 5, Political Pressure and Ultimatums. This is all about enforcing compliance. The source really highlights how Donald Trump is using extreme rhetoric to raise the stakes and unify the party behind this specific act. By framing the Save America Act as this silver bullet that supposedly ensures a century of political victory, the message to any wavering Republican senator is crystal clear. Passing this isn't just about policy. They're framing it as the absolute key to the party's survival. It creates this intense environment where a no vote is basically equated with sabotaging the entire party. And to enforce that compliance, Trump outlines a pretty dire scenario of what he claims will happen if they fail to pass the bill. The commentator notes he's leveraging a lot of fear here to keep the ranks in line. The narrative goes that if Democrats take power, they'll immediately terminate the filibuster themselves, pack the Senate by adding 2 new states, which means 4 more senators, 8 more congressmen, and 20 extra electoral votes. The underlying threat is existential. Pass this bill using our loophole right now, or the opposing party will structurally lock you out of power forever. So, who is all this pressure actually for? Well, the commentator concludes that this entire campaign, complete with threats of primary challengers, is aimed squarely at securing the votes of just 3 moderate Republican senators. The source refers to these holdouts as rhinos, Republicans in name only, and makes it explicitly clear that they are the sole targets of this overwhelming pressure. The warning is blunt. If these specific lawmakers stall the strategy, they will be systematically primaried and removed from office by 2028 or 2030. It is a highly targeted, absolutely zero-tolerance enforcement of party unity. As we wrap up this explainer, we really have to ask how this playbook might reshape the future of legislative maneuvers. I mean, what we've just broken down isn't just about one specific bill. It's practically a masterclass in modern political mechanics. From redefining the nature of a bill to squeeze it into a 50-vote budget loophole, to weaponizing polling data, to unleashing these top-down existential ultimatums against a handful of party moderates, this is exactly how modern legislative warfare is conducted. So the question I want to leave you with is this. As procedural guardrails continue to be bypassed by escalating partisan pressure, is this intricate, high-stakes maneuvering simply the new normal for how deeply divided governments pass major laws? It's definitely something to chew on as you watch the news unfold over the coming months.